Hello everyone, welcome to the second part of my Spider-Man Retrospective. Last time, we took a look at the Sam Raimi trilogy, and I discussed the goods and the bads of the movie, and why I don't really like them all that much. In this one, we're going to be doing the same thing for the Andrew Garfield movies. This franchise started 4 years after Spider-Man 3, replacing everyone. It actually came in the place of Spider-Man 4, which, according to the storyboards and rumors, was going to be a fucking fever dream. It would start with Peter fighting Mysterio, but then he'd run into Black Cat, who is apparently the daughter of the Vulture, who's also in this movie. And then Kurt Connors was going to become the Lizard. So rather than having a story stuffed with 3 villains, we were going to get 4. Yeah, so that movie never got made, as you already know. Instead, Sony ended up rebooting the franchise with an all-new cast and creative team. They got Mark Webb to direct, who also made 500 Days of Summer, which is a fucking amazing movie. They also cast Andrew Garfield in the titular role, and got Emma Stone to play Gwen Stacy. It's clear that this movie is trying to take a different angle. Where Raimi immediately adapted Peter's relationship with MJ, Webb went with Peter's first big relationship. These movies were teased as the untold story of Spider-Man, so let's jump in and take a look at this new untold story. Alright, starting off with the first movie, as one does, we have a pretty basic story. This movie follows Peter Parker as he gets bit by a spider, gets powers, loses his uncle, and then he takes on the moniker of Spider-Man. I don't know about you guys, but I think this story might have been told before. In all seriousness, the untold aspect of the story is the subplot about Peter's parents. In this movie, and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 especially, a big emphasis is placed on Peter's parents. This movie teases some big secrets for his parents, starting with Peter playing hide-and-seek with his dad. He enters Richard's office and sees that the window was broken and the room was trashed. He calls for his dad, who sees the mess and immediately takes Peter to live with May and Ben. After this, we get to see Peter in his normal life, and I gotta say, right off the bat, this movie does 2 things that I love. First, it shows Peter's normal life, a lot more than Raimi did in the first movie. For me, this just works a lot better, because it lets you flesh out the characters and helps you care for them before shit ultimately hits the fan. Secondly, Peter is an asshole. This time around, Peter is constantly shown to be irresponsible before becoming Spider-Man, which is something that I think makes the responsibility theme work a lot more. My personal favorite example of that is when he absolutely humiliates Flash, which is in stark contrast to how Tobey's Peter was fighting in self-defense. Anyways, in this movie, the reason that Peter gets powers is a bit more convoluted than the field trip in the original. After school one day, Peter has to help Ben clean the basement because of a water leak. In doing so, he finds an old briefcase that belonged to his father, and he asks about it, specifically about a photo that he finds of his dad and Kurt Connors. May and Ben decide not to tell him, but after a little while, Ben tells Peter the truth. While looking into his father's stuff, Peter finds a formula with a specific logo. Anyways, due to this, Peter ends up sneaking into Oscorp to meet Connors for himself. He does this by stealing someone's security badge and getting the actual person kicked out. He briefly interacts with Connors and then bumps into someone who drops files with the same logo as his father's formula. Due to this, Peter follows the guy, watches him put in a complex password, and then copies it with no issue, which brings him into a room with a shit ton of spiders. He pulls on one of their webs, and that releases them, leading to him getting bit. Unfortunately, this is the first hint of Oscorp being the epicenter of everything in this universe. I'll expand on that when we get into the next movie. Anyways, so Peter gets bitten, he gets kicked out of Oscorp, and then we get to the worst part of the movie. Now, it's not the worst because it's bad, it was just edited on crack. It's the sequence where Peter's powers first manifest, and he accidentally ends up fighting a bunch of people on the subway. I don't know, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just bad. It flashes between cuts, and there should have been a seizure warning on this. Anyways, let me focus on a lot of what I like before I get into some of the flaws. I really like the sequence leading to Uncle Ben's death. Peter humiliates Flash and breaks the basketball net, leading to Ben being called in because Peter got in trouble. Due to this, he has to take a later shift at work, so he tells Peter to pick up May. Peter ends up going to meet with Dr. Connors, so he doesn't pick her up, which leads to him getting a lecture from Ben. Ben brings up that Peter's father believed that if you had the ability to do good things, you had a responsibility to do them. Peter then gets upset because Ben is using his father as an argument, so he argues back and then leaves to get milk. Unfortunately, Peter is 2 cents short and can't get the milk, so he goes to leave, but as he does, the next person in line robs the store and tosses Peter his milk. The cashier then asks Peter for help catching him, but Peter ignores it. Meanwhile, Ben went out to follow Peter and ended up running into the thief. This encounter ends with him getting shot, and Peter stumbles upon his dead body. I personally feel like this works better than it did in the Raimi movie. First and foremost, it's in character for Peter to act this way, so it actually reinforces the great responsibility lesson. I also like that we actually see the gunshot. It makes it feel tangible rather than something that we stumble upon as it happened off screen. I also like that Peter doesn't get to have any final words with him. It makes it a lot more of a gut punch to know that Peter's last real words with his uncle were filled with anger. Anyways, after this, Peter goes home, the police tell May what happened, and Peter sees the sketch of the killer and realizes that it's the guy from the store. So this starts Peter's vendetta. And this is something that is commonly criticized, but Peter becomes Spider-Man because he's looking for the killer. People think that this isn't Spider-Man, but honestly, it's not supposed to be. They're looking at it wrong. Peter never actually uses the Spider-Man name until he goes to the bridge, and the point is that Peter has to grow into being a hero. He starts off as an asshole, then uses his powers to get revenge, so he hunts down the guy who did it. That's the origin. In this movie, they just extended the part where he tries to find the guy. I have to say, it's kind of ridiculous that they say that Peter making the suit and hunting the killer is bad, when in the Raimi movies, Peter hunts down and causes the death of someone. This Peter doesn't even find the killer, so it's more accurate to the character of Spider-Man. Anyways, Peter starts going out as Spider-Man, and he also starts dating Gwen, and he interacts with Captain Stacy, who hates Spider-Man. He thinks that Peter is a vigilante who's doing more harm than good. This causes a heated discussion at the dinner table. Peter then reveals his identity to Gwen, and then the lizard attacks the bridge, so he goes out. This then leads into the best scene of the movie, where Peter has to let Connors escape so he can save a kid from a falling car. This scene, better than any other, encapsulates the anyone can wear the mask aspect of Spider-Man. Peter's mask initially scares the kid, so he takes it off to give him a face to look at. Then, when the car lights on fire, Peter gives him the mask and lets him wear it. So the kid puts it on and starts climbing, because the mask gives him that confidence. And when he gets the kid back to his dad, that's when Peter first uses the Spider-Man name, completing his journey into being a hero. Following this, Peter realizes that Connors turned himself into a lizard and sets out to stop him. Blah blah blah, Captain Stacy dies, Peter and Gwen cure Connors, and yeah, that's the movie. I personally enjoy this more as an origin. I think it has a lot of interesting ideas and presents them in a much more engaging way than the Raimi films. I truly prefer Peter's character here. I like that Gwen isn't constantly a damsel in distress, and I really like Connors. See, something I didn't touch on before is the way that Connors became the lizard. I mentioned that Peter found a formula with a specific logo on it, and that formula is the decay rate formula, which is used in cross-species genetics, something that Connors specializes in. Due to the connection between Connors and his dad, Peter goes to Oscorp, which gets him his powers. Then, because of this, Peter goes to see Connors again because he's worried about how much the spider DNA will affect him. This conversation leads to Peter giving Connors the decay rate formula, but Peter writes it down wrong, which leads to the formula not working properly. However, due to his boss, Connors tests it on himself before he can see that the serum wasn't working correctly, so he regrows his arm, but then the lizard DNA keeps spreading, and he becomes a full-on lizard. I love this. It ties into Peter's arc of becoming a hero and being responsible. Since he was the one who gave Connors the formula, he personally feels responsible for it, so he feels the need to stop it. I feel like a lot of the movie works really well. There are some problems though. Peter ends the movie by directly breaking the promise he made to Captain Stacy. He promised to stay away from Gwen, and then decided to actually stay with her. I know that this is further explored in the second movie, but come on. I also don't think that Peter's parents should be that big of a focus. It's acceptable in this movie, but they tease a big secret about Peter's dad, and that has to be expanded upon in the sequels, so... I also kinda wish that they expanded a bit on Peter's journey to become Spider-Man. I really like everything they did here, but I wish that Peter himself would have had some self-reflection before the bridge scene. Like, something where he questions if he's doing the right thing, because up until the bridge, he's specifically going after criminals that fit the description of his uncle's killer. He's doing it purely out of revenge, and he lets some of the criminals go, so I feel like there could have been more before Peter ends up going to the bridge. Other than that, though, I don't really have many problems with this film. I really like the cast, I really like the story, and although there are some minor issues, I think this is a really solid Spider-Man movie. Easily my favorite out of the 4 so far. This is a crazy movie. Just like the third Raimi film, this movie is stuffed with villains. It's stuffed with bad writing, bad acting, miscasting, stupid choices, editing problems, you name it. It is, without a doubt, the worst Spider-Man movie. But here's a hot take. I actually had a really good time watching this one. More so than the first 2 Raimi films. Now, don't get me wrong, this is objectively the worst movie, but that doesn't mean it isn't enjoyable. It's one of those things where, like, the good is good, and the bad is so absurd that it's good, for the most part. So, this is the one movie where I feel like it's genuinely necessary to look at the entire thing. It starts with Peter's dad, and we're seeing what he was doing when Peter was playing hide-and-seek. Funnily enough, when Peter was looking for him, Richard was recording a whole-ass secret message. Anyways, the message ends when Peter calls him to his office, and he sees that it was broken into, so he drops Peter off with May and Ben, just like the first movie shows. Then he goes and destroys his research. He kills the spiders he worked on, he takes the decay rate formula, and he attempts to flee the country. However, on the plane, he's attacked by the flight attendant or whatever. On the flight, the guy shoots Mary, but Richard knocks him out. He then sets up an upload to something that Mary refers to as Roosevelt. Then, the assassin wakes up, so Richard uses his gun to shoot a window, and the plane crashes. This movie is already wild, because why are we focused on this instead of Spider-Man? Anyways, we cut to black, and then Peter drops in from the sky. Here, we get our first look at the new Spider-Man suit, and by God, it's fucking beautiful. And the swinging is just perfect. This is amazing. So anyways, Peter catches wind of an Oscorp truck that has been hijacked by It was hijacked by the Rhino, that's who this is. Peter jumps up to the side of the car and starts quipping. It's really funny, but not because Peter is funny, but because Peter swings away and lets Alexei crash into innocent civilians. Holy shit! This is not what Peter would do in this situation, but whatever. He swings away from the crash that he let happen in order to save someone from said crash. That someone is Max Dillon, played by Jamie Foxx. This is the second instance of a character being miscast. The first is Rhino. This shit is horrible. Anyways, Max had been walking down the street with some blueprints, but people kept bumping into him, so he dropped them. Then the crash happens and Peter swoops by and saves him from getting hit. He then webs up the blueprints, fixes Max's hair, and gives him some words of encouragement. This interaction sets up Max's motivation in this movie. It's wild. You see, nobody notices him, so he feels like he's a nobody. Then, Spider-Man shows up, saves him, and notices his name on his name tag. Peter then tells Max that he needs him. Max takes this to heart, and now believes that he is best friends with Peter. Anyways, back to the carnage, Peter is still doing nothing to stop Alexei from crashing into anything and everything. Instead, the truck, which is transferring plutonium, ends up getting damaged, and the plutonium falls out of its holding tray. This means that Peter has to jump into the truck and catch all of it, which is pretty funny.
Okay, stop it! Phew. Oh, come on!
In his effort to catch all of them, he ends up getting hit by a police cruiser, and again, Andrew Garfield is an absolute gem. After this, we find out that Peter is actively missing his graduation by being here, which is so great because he totally could have been there if he just didn't do this. So anyways, Gwen calls Peter. They have a brief interaction before Gwen gets called up to read her valedictorian speech, and that's overlaid with Peter saving people. Then, Rhino gets out of the car, takes one thing of plutonium, and tries to shoot Peter. Peter dodges, takes the plutonium, throws the gun in the air, and then strips Alexei before the gun falls back down and knocks him out. Also, in this fight, we get to see Peter's conscience, represented by the ghost of Captain Stacy. It's good to see that he has one, but it would have been nice if he used it before this happened. Anyways, Peter zips off and gets to his grad right as his name is called. So after briefly celebrating with May and Gwen, Peter sees Captain Stacy again, and we get a flashback to Peter promising him that he'd stay away from Gwen. From there, we cut to the outside of a restaurant where Peter had been invited to eat dinner with Gwen and her family. However, he's hovering because he's feeling so torn about his promise. Gwen goes out to talk to him about it, and they have a discussion that has some genuinely good acting, but some interesting dialogue.
I break up with you. I break up with you.
I don't know if it's wrong from a grammatical standpoint, but saying I break up with you just sounds so wrong. Anyways, as you just heard, this conversation ends with Gwen dumping Peter. We then cut to a montage of Peter being Spider-Man, which has some of the best Spider-Man scenes. There's a kid who's being bullied, and some kids stomp on his science project, but then Peter jumps down and the kids run away, and Peter fixes up the science project with his webs. He then walks the kid home. It's just... this is the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Anyways, over the montage, there's some voice-over dialogue of New Yorkers discussing Spider-Man and whether or not he's doing good or doing harm. This montage also includes a call from Max Dillon, where he says that Spider-Man is misunderstood and that they are best friends. The montage then ends with Peter watching Gwen from the top of a building, before he notices a fire and has to go help them. Anyways, after this, we learn that May is trying to balance two jobs, as well as seeing that Peter is still hung up about his parents. Then, we get some characterization from Max. Today is his birthday, and in his apartment, he basically put up a fucking shrine for Spider-Man. He's so lonely that he has a conversation with himself pretending to be Spider-Man, imagining that Peter would know it's his birthday after their singular conversation. It's certainly an interesting way to characterize him, but they do showcase the depths of his obsessiveness. He latches on to the only person who showed him attention. So anyways, Max works at Oscorp, and he gets there late, and then we have this interaction, which is written just so weirdly. I can't even explain it, you just gotta watch.
Dylan, you're late.
Doggone trains are so slow, sir.
Don't you realize that Oscorp is now responsible for the entire city's
I submitted
energy
a lot of
supply?
designs for the power grid, and they used a lot of them, and I noticed that, and those power grids were designed by me.
I can't even fathom how the conversation moves along. This guy calls out Max for being late, to which Max responds that the trains are slow. In response to that, the guy brings up the Oscorp power grid, as if that has anything to do with what they're talking about. This segues into Max explaining that his designs were taken and used to build that grid. So this was just a poorly disguised attempt to exposition dump that Max is familiar with the power grid. Immediately after pointing this out, the boss guy says,
Sure you did. I'm Spider-Man.
to which Max responds by attacking him and saying this.
You're no Spider-Man. He's a Leo. You're a Sagittarius. You will Spectrum again. I'm gonna rip your well-groomed head off.
This movie is so unserious, I can't. It turns out that was just in Max's head, and it's another look into how his loneliness has driven him mad. Anyways, immediately after this, Max gets into an elevator and ends up meeting Gwen. Guys, as I was writing this, I felt kinda conflicted. I wasn't sure if this was turning out good, because I felt like I was moving through the events too fast, but this is just how the movie plays out. So, Gwen and Max are in the elevator, and they see a news report about Spider-Man, prompting Max to talk about how Peter saved him. Gwen gets a little jealous about that because he mentions that Peter said he needed Max, but we don't really dwell on that because immediately after this scene, we cut to a new storyline because we just desperately needed another one. We meet up with Harry Osborn as he goes home and has a final conversation with his father. Since neither of these characters were actually in the last movie, we need some exposition to set the scene. Can we get some of that?
I never told you that it's genetic. Our disease, the Osborn curse. And it began at your age.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's nice. That works nicely.
So Harry is introduced into the story, and we see that Norman is dying from the fucking Goblin disease. Norman's only purpose in this story is to die, and basically tell Harry, you're dying too. However, they set this up terribly. Norman is like ancient, and he's just now dying. He tells Harry that he's now at the age where the disease starts. Harry takes this as, oh fuck, I'm dying right now, and then spends the rest of the movie in panic mode. It would have worked better if they said Harry's symptoms were showing themselves earlier than they did for Norman, because then we'd understand why Harry was so panicked. Norman then gives Harry a thingy that's supposed to have all of his research to cure the disease. Anyways, Norman dies off screen, and then we cut back to Oscorp where the news is immediately announced, and everybody gets the day off. Except for Max, for some reason, because despite the entire office being dismissed, they tell Max to go fix a short somewhere in the building. Max goes and sees that something is unplugged and sparking, so he radios in to get the power shut off, but everybody is leaving, so nobody is there to shut it down. Knowing this, does Max leave this for the next day where the power can safely be shut off? Or does he just raw dog it, bare hands against something channeling who knows how much electricity? I'll give you 30 seconds. Okay, time's up. If you chose B, you'd be right, because nobody makes good choices. Max proceeds to get electrocuted, fall into a tank of electric eels, and gets electrocuted so bad that his teeth get fixed. This movie is something else. So basically, the eels that bite Max are genetically altered, because of course they are, it's Oscorp. He's so badly electrocuted that he turns blue, and his clothes burn into a shell on top of him. Anyways, we cut from this to Harry being a dick to his employees before Peter shows up and asks for Harry. This is where we get the retcon that tells us that Peter and Harry are actually supposed to be best friends. Harry was not mentioned at all in the last movie, mind you, so this is undoubtedly a retcon. Anyways, Peter and Harry go out and skip stones and whatever, and have a conversation about their lives. Peter mentions Gwen and how their relationship is complicated, and Harry says that he hates things that are complicated. Anyways, as Harry and Peter catching up, Oscorp board members are looking at pictures of Max after the accident. They comment about how investors don't like that Harry is taking over Oscorp, and if the Max thing gets out there, stock is going to plummet. So they decide that it's time to get Harry out, and they have to keep Max as a nobody. From here, we intercut between two things. First, we see Max waking up in the morgue and discovering that he has these new abilities. He then takes some clothes and leaves. After that, we see Peter getting a call from Gwen. They meet up and discuss some ground rules so that they can proceed as friends rather than dating. We then cut back to Max walking down the street and setting off all the car alarms because of his electric powers. Back to Peter and Gwen, she mentions this new restaurant that she loves, and Peter ends up revealing that he's been following her, because apparently it opened after they broke up, but Peter mentions that he knows she loves it, so he ends up admitting that he's been following her at least once a day, and she doesn't think that it's weird. Okay. They almost kiss before she tells him about the fact that she's in the process of getting into an Oxford program in England. As she's telling him, Peter's spidey sense goes off, and he rushes off to Times Square. Back with Max, he ends up in Times Square, where he ends up drawing electricity out of a pipe in the ground. People start to notice, and the police show up to apprehend Max. In doing so, Max accidentally flips a car because it almost runs him over. More cops show up, and everybody starts running, and people begin filming as the situation gets onto the news. Max takes notice of this, and doesn't react to the fact that he now looks like a glowing member of the Blue Man Group, and instead is enamored by the fact that people can finally see him. I do think it's kinda stupid that he has no reaction to seeing that he's completely changed, but I do like the fact that the attention is something he cares about. It's definitely in character. So anyways, the cops throw some smoke bombs at him, but his electricity fucks with them, so they start blasting him, leading him to let out a shockwave that sends everyone and everything flying. So then, Peter swoops in, saves a cop, and starts being his usual self, but Max sees him and immediately reaches out to his friend. Peter obviously doesn't remember him, because last time they interacted, Max wasn't infringing on DC's copyright, but Peter does take notice of how Max's powers are inadvertently sending currents through the grates on the floor, and moving towards a crowd of people. I really like this detail. It's nice to see that Peter is actively taking the time to be aware of his surroundings and get a bearing before he does anything. So Max reminds Peter of their interaction at the start of the movie, and Peter actually does end up remembering him, and I really like their interaction here.
Yes, I remember you. Of course I remember you. You have my eyes and ears.
I don't know what's going on with me.
I can see that. I can see you don't want to be here. I can see you're scared. I can see you don't know what's happening to you. I can see that you don't want to hurt anybody.
This is a good example of the tone matching what's happening. Anyways, Peter genuinely tries to reach a peaceful solution, but when Max steps in a puddle, the electricity spikes and a cop shoots at him. I guess they forgot that the bullets earlier didn't do shit. Anyways, Max gets mad, so he shoots back at the cop, and Peter shoots a web at Max, which ends up frying his web shooter. Peter uses his other web shooter to save the cop Max was shooting at, and due to this, the crowd's attention shifts from Max to Peter. After seeing this, Max thinks that Peter set him up, and decides that they're not actually friends, and that Peter is just a selfish asshole. This throws Max over the rails, and he just starts blasting, so Peter is left to use one web shooter to stop a car and stop multiple people from touching metal railings, because apparently nobody passed science class. It's a pretty dope action scene, and it's a great way of showing how Peter can think on the spot to find solutions to the problems he's in. Anyways, Peter gets hit, disappears for a little bit, and then comes back with a hose and a firefighter helmet, and he hits Max with water, which takes him out. I absolutely love this. It's so goofy, but it just feels so Spider-Man to me. So let's pause here for a second, because I want to talk about Max's motivation. I saw a review once that said that it was stupid, and while it probably could have used more thought, I do think that it's not terrible. Max has been invisible his whole life, so obviously when Peter gives him that attention, he latches onto it. Then, Peter shows up here, in a vital moment where Max is finally being recognized, and he steals that spotlight, and attacks him along with the police. So, in the context of this movie, I think it makes sense, but I also do think that they could have gone about the origin without making it all about attention. Anyways, following this, Peter sees Gwen, who followed him to Times Square, and who was also holding the metal blockade. Gwen is supposed to be a genius. She's getting into Oxford, and she doesn't realize that holding metal while watching a guy who can send electrical currents might just be a bad idea. So Peter goes to talk to her, and he just expresses his disappointment with her going to England. He then goes home and tries to relax, but we just desperately need another plotline, so Peter is presented with his father's briefcase. This leads to a montage where Peter goes insane and brutalizes his bedroom wall into this fucking mess. This is all supposedly about figuring out what his father was doing and why he left, but he also throws a picture of Gwen on the wall and writes, "Do I have to lose you too?" So like, what the fuck is this wall about? He also uses tape for everything, including this picture frame. He tapes a picture frame to the wall. I don't even know. After this, we cut to Harry, who starts to see a rash on his skin. He goes to fuck with it, but when it inevitably hurts, he accidentally drops the thingy and gains access to all the files, including a full-body exoskeleton that can attach to your nervous system and heal you. Okay. From there, we cut back to Peter, who gets another montage. This time, he's trying to make his web shooters resistant to electricity, and he keeps blowing up batteries. It's actually a pretty fun sequence, and once again, I love Andrew's Peter. He's just so funny. Anyways, we cut from that to the next morning, where Peter is sleeping on the ceiling when he gets a call from Harry. He tries to web his phone, but he misses and he yanks a crowbar up, seemingly hitting himself with it before he actually gets his phone and picks up the call. Harry tells Peter that he's dying, but he thinks that Peter will be able to help him. So Peter goes to Oscorp and Harry shows him a video of both of their fathers discussing their genetic trials to make a cure for Norman, which ended up turning into this cross-species genetics from the first movie. So Harry realizes that Spider-Man is actually a successful human trial of this experiment, and he can do
Everything else a spider can, including self-heal.
Oh my god, who wrote this? Also, if this is supposed to be an end-all be-all for diseases, why did Peter catch a cold earlier? I don't think they thought this one through. So anyways, he asks Peter to set up a meeting with Spider-Man because Harry wants his blood, and as this is happening, Gwen accesses Oscorp's mainframe and tries to find info on what happened to Max. It's so stupid because as soon as she searches for Max, the guys from earlier get a ping that someone is searching for him, and they block it by literally typing in block search and track computer. You can see it on the screen here, it's ridiculous. So anyways, Gwen sees her search is blocked, and then the Oscorp execs show up to get her. Back with Peter and Harry, Peter is clearly hesitant to try to help Harry because he wants to avoid a repeat of what happened with Connors. But Harry says that the only reason that happened was because Connors was weak. What? Harry begs Peter, and the reason that he's asking Peter is because of the fucking pictures. It's because Peter takes pictures of Spider-Man. I still don't understand why that means Peter actually knows Spider-Man. It's such a weak connection. So anyways, after being literally begged, Peter agrees, and he heads down the elevator where he sees Gwen, so he pops out and she pulls him into a closet where they discuss what's going on. Gwen talks about how Oscorp is covering up Max's accident, and Peter talks about Harry's request for his blood. I don't know exactly how Gwen found out about Max's accident, but whatever. So Peter and Gwen discuss the current problems they're facing, they kiss, and then they comment on the pace of the movie. After this, Peter goes out and installs the security while Gwen escapes in an elevator. In said elevator, Gwen meets Harry. If I've been properly keeping track, this is now the third time that an Oscorp elevator has been used to move the plot forward. Anyways, they briefly talk about how Peter needs Gwen to give him direction in life. So then, we cut to Max being tortured. Basically, this foreign scientist at the Ravencroft Institute was hired by Oscorp to study Max. He does this by shocking him.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, so this is fucking stupid. Kafka is easily the worst character in this movie. His scenes are bad, his accent is bad, he's constantly sticking his chin into the camera. Like, bro, back off, I don't want to see inside your nose. This shot also looks really fake, it's weird. Also, they keep Max submerged in water. How do they know that he won't drown? You know, better question, how doesn't he drown? Anyways, Max goes on this whole spiel about how if they don't kill him, he's going to break out and kill the light in the world, so that everyone can see what it's like to live in his world. Keep this speech in mind.
I'm gonna kill the light. Everyone in the city is gonna know how it feels to live in my world. A world without power. A world without mercy. A world without Spider-Man.
The funniest part is that at the end, Max says,
"Don't you know I'm Electro?"
As if this isn't the first and only time that anybody calls him that. So anyways, we cut to Aunt May looking quite upset in Peter's room. She's not happy about the wall, but Peter says that he knows she's hiding something and that he needs to know the truth.
You lie to me. I know you love me.
I don't.
I know you love me, but you do. Aunt May. You have to tell me, May.
Oh, yeah, she has to tell you? What about you?
Who does this to you?
Please go to sleep, Aunt May.
Please tell me.
Aunt May, please, please, please go to sleep.
Listen to me. Secrets have a cost. They're not for free.
You dick?
May initially refuses, but after Peter reassures her that he loves her and that he appreciates everything she's done for him, she ends up telling Peter that after the funeral for his parents, government agents came to their doorstep and told them that Richard took his research and ran off to make a private deal. So then, we cut back to Harry. So, guys, just one thing. It may seem like I'm shortening things down too much, or like I'm just giving you the bare bones explanations for all of the scenes, but I'm being completely honest with you when I say that the movie is just moving this fast. So, we're at Harry's place, where the guy is just taking a nap. He's schnoozing, and he's woken up by Peter as Spider-Man, who swings in and starts chatting with him. Peter gives him the bad news that he can't just give away his blood. Now, if you think about it for more than 2 seconds, there are a metric shit ton of valid reasons for Peter to say no to this. 1. His concerns about the lizard are valid. There's no telling what the effects of the spider venom would be on Harry. Peter has no real understanding of why it worked for him, and who knows how the spider DNA would react to Harry's disease. 2. Blood types. Peter mentions that their blood may be incompatible, which would kill Harry. He's right. There are different blood types, and some of them don't go together. The movie doesn't really dwell on this, but if Peter and Harry have opposing blood types, then giving Harry a transfusion would cause his body to literally start attacking itself, which would clot his blood, and quite possibly kill him. When Peter says this, Harry responds,
I'm already dying. Your blood can't make me die more.
That is a fucking stupid line, not only because it's awkward dialogue, but because it's just wrong. It quite literally can make him die more. If their blood types are incompatible, it will most likely kill him faster than the Goblin disease, and if it doesn't kill him, it'll make his life more miserable. Right now, the disease has done nothing close to what it did to his father, so to say that he can't die more is a gross overstatement, considering that his father was green and bedridden, while Harry is quite capable of movement. The symptoms will worsen, and by definition, that is dying more. So anyways, Harry gets mad at him for saying no, and he tries to offer him money, but Peter is adamant that they just take some time to work out a better solution. Harry throws a glass, but it ends up shattering and hitting himself in the face, which is interesting because when they cut back, he barely has a mark there. Peter then swings out, and we get probably my favorite line in this movie.
You're a fraud, Spider-Man!
I have quoted this so many times. His line delivery is so funny to me. Anyways, we cut from this to Peter swinging into a wall, another fun example of his clumsiness, although this time it's more so from his frantic feelings. He tries to rant to Gwen about everything that's going on, but he ends up kinda getting in the way of her Oxford interview, so he ends up leaving so she can get to that. He goes home and tears down his wall of craziness, and in his rage, he throws his dad's calculator against the wall, and a bunch of subway tokens fall out. He calls back to what May said and Googles Roosevelt plus subway station plus D-train, and finds out about this secret subway station meant to hide President Roosevelt when he was moving through New York. I do have a kind of problem with this because they act like the calculator housing these subway tokens is some big revelation, when the subway token was literally in the first movie. He had a subway token in the bag. He didn't have to break the calculator to find them, but I digress. Back with Harry, his assistant or something, Felicia, tells him that she overheard other employees talking about a secret projects facility where they had vials of the genetically altered spider venom stored before they killed the spiders. When he looks into this, he finds out that all of these secrets have been approved by Harry Osborn. He watches a video of Max's speech in Ravencroft, which is where we get our first example of them changing the things that we've already seen. In the actual speech, Max says,
"A world without power. A world without mercy. A world without Spider-Man."
But in the footage, he says,
"A world without power. A world without Spider-Man."
As Harry is watching this, his access is revoked, and the other board members come in and fire him. This scene actually has my favorite characterization for Harry, but it's only for this scene. He sees the Max speech, then the execs come in to fire him, and instead of just bitching about how they're betraying him or they kept it from him, he says,
"You are experimenting on people in there."
Which is something that I quite like. Thinking about it, it's kind of dumb that they frame Harry for covering up a death at Oscorp, because they wanted to keep that secret. So if their goal is to make investors happy by getting rid of Harry and hiding the accident with Max, why would they frame Harry for hiding the accident with Max? When this inevitably goes public, the info they're trying to hide goes public with it. Anyways, we cut from that to the most batshit insane thing that happens in this movie. Peter sneaks into the secret subway station, and he puts one of the tokens into the turnstile, and then the fucking track opens, and a whole ass train comes up with all of Richard's files. What the fuck? So he goes into the subway and watches the video that we saw at the start of the movie. This is intercut with Harry breaking into Ravencroft. So we find out that Norman Osborn made a deal with some military organization where Oscorp would be funded, and in return, the research would be used to make biological weapons. Richard was against this, so he ran. He killed the spiders and took his research. However, Norman falsified evidence against him, so he had to abandon his life to protect Peter. He also reveals that he put his DNA into the spiders, which made it so that Oscorp couldn't continue the experiments or actually use the spiders for anything. That's why the spider worked for Peter. So this is all just exposition, and it's been criticized to hell because it ruins the anyone can wear the mask thing. Anyone could have been bitten by that spider. Anyone could have been Spider-Man. But when you give an explanation about why it only works for Peter, they make it so that only he can wear the mask. It takes away from the message. These movies have moments that give way to that theme, like the bridge theme in the first movie. That is a brilliant way to showcase the idea that anyone can wear the mask. But this stupid subplot with his father is tearing that message apart. Anyways, we cut back to Ravencroft, where Harry is trying to break Max out of the prison. Security is alerted, so Harry is desperately trying to get Max to go along with him. And this is where Harry's character moves away from caring that Oscorp was experimenting on people to just caring about himself. He goes down there and says that he'll let Max free if he helps him break into the secret projects facility. Max finally agrees when Harry says that he needs him, so he uses his powers to zap out of his containment and kill all the guards, taking Harry. He then puts Kafka into the containment thingy and lowers him into the water. So right here, if I've counted correctly, Max has a kill count of 7. That doesn't really matter for this movie, but it will matter for something else, so keep this in mind. After they're all dead, Harry and Max talk briefly, and it's so stupid.
I had a friend once. It didn't work out.
Yeah, me too.
I don't even... Max refers to his friendship with Spider-Man not working out, and I think Harry is referring to his friendship with Peter? But the last time Peter and Harry talked, Peter said that he'd talked to Spider-Man. Peter did what Harry wanted. Also, the dialogue is just bad. I had a friendship that didn't work out. Oh yeah, man, same. Okay, let's team up and kill Spider-Man. Bro, what? So then, we cut to Peter leaving the subway, and he gets a call from Gwen about how she's packing up and leaving for Oxford that night, and that it would probably be easier for her to just go and not dwell on it, and blah blah blah. We don't have time for that, because we need to turn Harry into the Goblin. So Electro cuts the power to the security cams, and then kills the head of security right as he's trying to warn the executive guy. His kill count goes up to 8 now. Anyways, Harry shows up and they confront the guy, but when they ask to get into special projects, exec guy just yells at them, so Electro kills him. Harry then whistles the Jeopardy theme as Electro shocks the guy back to life, and Harry forces him to go to secret projects, while Max is left to do whatever he wants. So, down in the secret projects, Harry forces the executive to load up a vial of the spider venom and inject it straight into Harry, who then starts dying. His fucking shirt rips before his body starts changing. This is such a weird scene. Anyways, the exec pulls the alarm, and then we get a sequence that should have had a seizure warning. And since I'm going to be showing it, here is a seizure warning. There are going to be clips with strobe lights and very flashy editing, so I'll put a timestamp up on screen, or you can look in the description if you want to skip past it. If not, this sequence will end with a TLDR of what's going on in the scene. When I say TLDR, then you'll know that the strobe lights are over. Alright, here we go. The alarm sets off strobe lights, so the scene is already a pain to watch, but then, they made the most god-awful directing and editing choices. The sequence is littered with extreme close-ups that cut away every 2 seconds, and I swear, the strobe lights are so disorienting that I thought there was a whole other effect going on here. I thought it was one of those effects where they overlay scenes and flash between them. It's weird, I don't like it. Anyways, there's also a slow motion shot. You can tell this wasn't meant to be slow motion, so the footage just looks really choppy. Harry then crawls directly to the Goblin armor, because he just knows where that is, of course. Then, in one cut, he goes from crawling on the floor to having the suit on. It detects fatal injuries and immediately starts the healing process. So, TLDR, the strobe lights are over now. Harry mutates and puts on a self-healing suit of armor. Got that? Great. He's out of the movie for a while now. So, while Gwen is in a cab on the way to the airport, Peter leaves her a message on a bridge. I can't be bothered to figure out which bridge, but Gwen sees it and gets out of the cab, where Peter then swoops her up. He decides that he doesn't care about anything else, and just wants to be with her, but right as they're having their happily ever after, Electro destroys the power grid and sends the whole city into a blackout. Peter and Gwen realize that this must be Max, and they briefly discuss a plan where Peter mentions that he hasn't been able to make his web shooters electric-proof. She comes up with the idea to magnetize them, so they do that, and then Peter is off to stop Max, but not before webbing Gwen to a police car so that she wouldn't be in harm's way. He takes off, and once again, the swinging scenes in this movie are top tier. I love them so much. Anyways, Peter follows Max to the power grid, where they have a fight, and Peter's new web shooters come in handy, helping him fight. However, when attacking Max, he ends up getting hit by a wave of electricity, allowing Max to get back up and start playing the Itsy Bitsy Spider by smashing into a bunch of towers. I don't even know. So anyways, Peter and Max go back to fighting, but then Gwen shows up and hits Max with the police car she was webbed to. Peter and Gwen have a brief argument because Peter doesn't want her there, but she says that helping is her choice and she isn't going anywhere. So they come up with a plan to use the emergency reset to fix the power grid and overcharge Electro. After deciding on that plan, Peter sees Captain Stacy again, and I have to say, I really like this. I've seen the Ghost Dad get memed on, but I kinda like it as a choice. Rather than constantly flashing back or having the dialogue from the first movie, this is a visual indication of Peter breaking his promise, and showing his guilt for it. It's a really good example of show, don't tell, and I feel like it's effective. In this scene where Peter needs to stop Electro and save the city, part of him is always thinking about his responsibility to keep her safe, and how he's breaking his promise. I don't know, I just really like it. Anyways, Gwen goes to the console room while Peter distracts Max and uses his webs to connect the broken cables. Once he does, he gets Gwen to reset the system, which gives the city power again, and charges Max to the point where he explodes. The day is saved! Hooray! Peter and Gwen briefly celebrate and talk about making the flight to England, but Peter's spider sense goes off as Harry flies in. Seeing Gwen hanging out with Spider-Man makes him realize that Peter is Spider-Man, and so this is where he gets mad at Peter for not giving his blood away. Harry, bud, look at yourself right now. The fucking spider venom gave you fatal injuries, and you're still mad at him for not giving you his blood? He was trying to save you from this. So anyways, since Harry is so hung up on Peter taking his hope away, he decides to take Peter's, so he grabs Gwen and starts flying away. Peter follows, and both him and Gwen try to get Harry to stop, resulting in him dropping Gwen into a clock tower. Peter catches her, and thus begins a sequence where Peter is trying to keep Gwen from falling down the tower, while also fighting Harry in said tower. Now, in retrospect, knowing about the Death of Gwen Stacy comic, and seeing how they literally put her in the same outfit, there isn't really any tension here. It's a very clear homage to the comic, and if you had any prior knowledge of it, it's quite obvious that she's going to die, especially considering all the foreshadowing with Peter's promise. However, I first saw this in 2014 when I was 8, and I had no idea that comic existed, so seeing Gwen die was insane for me. So, based on my own past experience with this scene, I will say that it is pretty tense to see how many close calls there are while Peter tries to save her. Anyways, we all know what happens here. Peter fails to stop the cogs from turning, resulting in the web snapping, dropping Gwen, and by the time he spins another web, it's already too late. There's generally a debate on whether or not Peter's web killed her, or if she hit the ground. In the comics, it seems clear-cut. She didn't hit the ground. Peter's web just caused whiplash and her neck snapped. Although, I'm pretty sure that moment in the comic is still debated. Anyways, in an attempt to create that same ambiguity, we can't really tell exactly how it happened here. If you look at it, it looks like Gwen hit the ground and bounced up, but there also isn't a visible head wound after the accident. Anyways, Peter drops down and tries to wake her up, but she dead, so cut to her funeral, and Peter staying at her grave as the seasons change. We then cut to Ravencroft, where Harry is being held. He gets a visit from this guy in a top hat, and we never see his face, but he's referred to as Mr. Fears. They discuss the fact that Spider-Man is gone, and the stage is set to make a small group of villains using the tech in the Oscorp secret project room. They're teasing the Sinister Six, as we see Fears walk past Doc Ock's arms, Vulture's wings, and a rhino suit. This is what I meant when I said that Oscorp is kind of the epicenter of this universe. I feel like it takes a lot away from the villains' origins if they just have their tech given to them, rather than having like their own distinct origins with it. But I don't know, that's just me. Anyways, we cut to a news report saying that Alexei was broken out of prison and is attacking the city. We see this from the perspective of a young boy who was from the montage at the start of the movie. We then cut to Peter and May, who have a little heart-to-heart about grief and moving on. May talks about moving Ben's stuff because it's not right to hold on to it when there are better places for it to be. This chat inspires Peter to watch Gwen's valedictorian speech, and he starts putting away the news clippings about his father and just generally cleans up his room, putting that part of himself behind him, and putting a photo on Gwen on his desk. In another movie, this would be a very powerful scene, but in this movie, it's bogged down by how much time had to be spent on other shit. Anyways, Peter finally decides to suit back up as Spider-Man, and he goes out to fight the Rhino. Cut back to the street where Rhino is, we see that the kid from earlier is dressed as Spider-Man, and his mom took him to watch the fight? He runs out past the barricade and stands up to Rhino, who takes a break from shooting at the cops to talk to the kid and taunt him. I understand what the point of this scene is, and I think that it's a really nice scene because Peter shows up and recognizes the kid as Spider-Man, and it's another example of them trying to reinforce the idea that anyone can wear the mask. However, the setup is stupid. The kid was at home, and his mother just decided, ah yes, let me take my kid to watch an active crime scene with a giant mecha rhino who's shooting guns and rockets. Oh yeah, this is big brain time. So anyways, Peter shows up and safely gets the kid back to his mom before taking on the Rhino. The end. Yeah, so this movie's crazy, and it's even more stuffed than Spider-Man 3 was. This movie is another example of Sony execs coming in and meddling with what could have been. Looking into it, Mark Webb has said that these two movies are his complete vision. However, the infamous Sony leaks happened around this time, and there were leaked emails that paint some different pictures. There's an email from a Sony employee to Amy Pascal, detailing some ideas that they had for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, including the idea to have an electronic dance music soundtrack, because it's hip with millennials, among other things. This would end up going on to become Electro's theme. So just from this, we can see that the soundtrack was meddled with. There's also the fact that this movie was clearly used to set up future installments. The Sinister Six were teased at the end of the movie, first with Harry, then Rhino, then the rest of the Oscorp secret projects. Even the Venom symbiote was shown in the trailer for this movie. This goes into the absolutely insane plan that Sony had if they ended up keeping the film rights to Spider-Man. Apparently, they would go ahead with a Sinister Six movie that brought the group together before they appeared in the next Spider-Man movie. However, that movie would be split into two parts, one in 2016 and the other in 2017. Also in 2017, there would be a Carnage film starring Emma Stone as Carnage, which would lead into 2018's Venom. That's right. Carnage would come before Venom. Then, in 2018 and 19, they would release another two-part Amazing Spider-Man story. This is also according to the Sony leaks, but it's backed up by Mark Webb, who went on to do an interview, and he mentioned that the Sinister Six movie was the plan. It's absolutely insane, and it's easy to tell that things were pushed into The Amazing Spider-Man 2 to make sure that they could lead into this extended universe. However, that just ended up bringing this movie down. On top of that, there are multiple deleted scenes and plot lines. Mary Jane was supposed to be introduced in this movie. They even filmed a bunch of scenes with her, but they all got scrapped. There was going to be a reveal at the end where Peter's dad was still alive. Max was going to have more layers to his origin. Oh my god! It's absolutely insane that this movie was made with how much they tried to stuff into it, and all of that just to set up a bunch of sequels that didn't happen. This movie was clearly butchered, because it had to fit in so many things. There's even a whole set of notes from Kevin Feige that are meant to make the movie better. Some of them were taken into account, like him saying that Oscorp shouldn't be spying on Peter, but others were discarded, such as toning down Paul Giamatti as the Rhino. There are also just some scenes where they re-record dialogue, and it very clearly doesn't match up with whatever they said in the original scene. In Times Square, when Max was trying to get Peter to remember him, he said,
"You said you needed me."
However, if you look at his lips, he doesn't say anything until,
"You said you needed me."
Also, I mentioned earlier that there was an editing error where the movie changed the dialogue from Electro's speech in Ravencroft. This actually happens again with Gwen's speech. At the start of the movie, she talks about living life to the fullest and following your own dreams, regardless of if you fail.
Time is luck. So don't waste it living someone else's life. Make yours count for something.
However, when Peter watches it at the end of the movie, Gwen's talking about never losing hope.
You must promise me that you will hold on to hope. Keep it alive. We have to be greater than what we suffer.
The speech is entirely different, and I just wonder, how the fuck did this happen? There's also a weird thing that I've seen. People apparently complained about the first movie because whenever Peter used his web shooters, there was a puff of smoke. However, they claim that that was fixed in this movie, but it wasn't. Now, I'm not here to criticize it. I think it gives a realistic feeling. It's like a spray bottle releasing its contents, or a can of soda opening and letting out the excess gas. Tom Holland's web shooters also let out a puff of smoke, but I've only ever heard it as a criticism for Andrew's movies, so I feel like it's a bit unfair. Anyways, this movie is really just a product of being too stuffed. If some storylines were cut out and there was a little more time to let the other ones properly develop, this could have been a great movie. There is a lot here that could be amazing, but it's dragged down by so many stupid choices and an abundance of plot lines. The movie follows so many characters. It's something that Feige pointed out. We follow Richard as he runs from Oscorp, Peter fighting Rhino, Max almost dying, Harry finding out about his disease, Max becoming Electro, Gwen going to Oxford, Oscorp execs framing Harry, Peter seeing the underground subway. Oh my god. It's tiring to keep track of all these different point of views and all these different storylines. I had to watch this movie a second time to make sure that I remembered all the plot points, and even then, I kept skimming through it to make sure that I wasn't skipping over anything while writing this. There's no doubt that this movie is the worst Spider-Man movie in a movie sense. Even with everything that I like, there is just too much that brings it down. That being said, I still had a blast with it, and I genuinely enjoyed watching both of these movies. I know that it's very bold to say that I like these and I don't like the Raimi movies, but that's just how I feel about them. This movie has amazing cinematography, some great character moments, a great Spider-Man suit, great acting apart from Dane DeHaan, and it just works for me, even if there are some batshit insane elements that should have been cut. So, with that being said, this is going to end part 2 of my Spider-Man retrospective. Next time, we'll be looking at the MCU trilogy, but until then, let me know what you guys thought of this one. Do you like the Amazing Spider-Man films, or are they the worst? I'd love to hear your opinions. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!